Hey everybody, we're the good doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Erin.
I'm Dr. Kristen.
You are very welcome to our YouTube channel. We are social scientists with PhDs who love having conversations about culture, both lived and popular. We are educators who work to have conversations about empathy and inclusivity by focusing on everything from systemic racism to romantic tropes in Bridgerton and everything that falls in between. We love to have conversations not only with each other over the Zoom, but with lots of other people as well. So be sure to like and subscribe to our channels and videos and comment below if you want to join in on the chat.
Today's video, is an example of our commitment to pop culture analysis from our unique perspective. Anything that's on streaming anywhere is fair game, but we do tend to focus on stories made by and about women. Today, we're covering episode 1 of the PBS and I think ITV show Miss Scarlet and the Duke, which in the United States aired on PBS starting in January of 2021, and is a fascinating and brief look at life in Victorian Edwardian England, and what it would be like to try to be a businesswoman in those times. The show is 6 episodes. We're going to be covering all 6. And if folks who have joined us before, you know that we do love a deep dive into a television show. We've covered previous to this, Handmaid's Tale, The Crown, and most recently Bridgerton. And you can find all those links below or elsewhere on the YouTubes, depending on where you're finding us. And so a couple things you should be aware of that we're going to get really excited about. We do love talking about clothes. And we love talking about the kind of casual examples of lived life within popular culture, and we'll be covering that a little bit, but we're also going to do some historical stuff and some deep dives. We'll do an episode recap for each of these and then talk about the themes that we'd like to draw out of them. So Dr. Erin,
yeah,
what is Miss Scarlet and the Duke about?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating flip, I think, on as we would say in the Holmes universe, a Holmesian perspective. So it's very clear that she is Eliza Scarlet is modeled after Sherlock Holmes, except she's a female detective, and the Watson like kind of assistant is this confusing person who is named William Wellington.
Guys, he's not a Duke, and I'm still 6 episodes later angry about that. I feel duped.
We really thought it was like hinting at this.
Oh, we're gonna cover titled people having jobs. This is gonna be like
fascinating. He's a police inspector, but he's also a Duke. He's not a Duke. His last name is Wellington, and so his nickname is the Duke, which the show is never explicit about. But he kind of provides a foil for Eliza in a lot of ways. He is representative of a very kind of masculine, misogynistic perspective on the role of women in society. I think,
and the mainstream one at the time.
Yeah.
Like he's the establishment.
Which was totally normal. So he's kind of like what she is coming up against. And she comes up against that misogyny, cultural misogyny, in a lot of places. But William, her relationship with William is one of those. And in this episode, he tells her, like, men are meant to be detectives. Like, women aren't allowed to be detectives. So that's kind of the Eliza of this episode.
They are also childhood friends, we should say. Yeah. He is a detective because her father got him into it. And so that's going to be something that they explore piecemeal throughout the series, but not explicitly. Spoiler alert, they do not kiss, even though you think they're going to on several occasions, and I'm grumpy about that. So
yeah, so they have this long-standing relationship through her father, who in this episode is missing and later dies. And so the title of Inheritance is kind of both Eliza inheriting her father's work, which she always wanted to do, but we get a lot of hints that, that's, even though that's what he kind of trained her for, she wanted to be a police detective when she grew up. But eventually we get flashbacks from her father, who's played by Mosley from Downton Abbey. I don't know.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I don't know the actor's real name, but I was so excited when he came on and I was like, it's Mosley.
I did not connect those dots at all. Okay.
Oh, so exciting. But we've eventually, by the time she's old enough, get a flashback where he says, like, you have to stop with this childishness.
You have to be a lady now. I can't talk to you anymore about chloroform. Yeah.
And laudanum, all the things that every child is raised with. So that's where Eliza is in this episode, and it kind of sets the scene for her throughout the whole series. She is grappling with this love and passion that she has for being a detective and for wanting to solve crimes and for not fitting into her gender stereotypes and molds that society has created for her. We see this as she interacts with Rupert Parker and his mother, Mrs. Parker, who is very clearly trying to get Rupert to propose. And Eliza kind of bristles with every time somebody tries to get her to fit into this box. But inheritance in this episode also means the main story that Eliza is tasked with solving. A gentleman comes to her wanting to find his niece, wants to engage her father in these services. At the early point in the episode, her father is missing, not deceased. And so she tries to put him off, but then also starts to investigate what happened to Clara Sims. Her father subsequently, as we said, dies. But she finds Clara and finds out that Clara was kind of on the run from her not so great husband.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert! Guy trying to find her is not her uncle. It's her husband, masquerading as her uncle. Her uncle is in fact dead, and her husband has found her because he wants to steal her inheritance from her uncle. Very convoluted, but what we get is a fascinating exploration of the lack of power that women had and the level of control that men had over women, their agency, their bodies, their money, their future. And what her husband ends up doing is he has her sent to an asylum so that he can take her money. And y'all, this happened all the time. And so I was super excited that in this first episode, they were like, we're going to go right into the heart of Victorian asylum issues, and that there was nothing wrong with her mentally, but it was a mechanism of control that her husband was utilizing so that he could take power and money.
In 1882, which is when this is set, which by the way, this is filmed in Dublin, which like gave me a total trip because the road that she lives on is like one that we've walked up and down a bunch of times. And I was like, she's going shopping at St. Stephen's Green Mall.
I know.
That's the toilet I always go to when I'm in that part of Dublin.
Yeah, it's Georgian Dublin and I love it so much. Love
it. So in 1882, it was really common to lock up your wife for anything. Just to quote really quickly from the history books, women's rights were extremely limited in this era, losing ownership of their wages, all of their physical property, and other cash they generated once they married. When a Victorian man and woman married, the rights of the woman were legally given over to her spouse. So for instance, she had no legal right to say no to sexual intercourse. She had no legal right to say no to bearing children. She had no legal right to retain her own money. All very
restricted.
So combine this with the fact that this is around the time where we start getting a lot of talk of female hysteria.
Mm-hmm.
And that being like the only mental illness that supposedly only affects women, which is a separate conversation to have. It was very common that for mouthy women, or women that couldn't give their husband a child or said no to sex, or I've read stories where like literally she burned the cooking one too many times. Asylums were more than happy to take women. They were workhouses more often than not. And there was a lot of cheap labor done for the British people in laundries and other such things by incarcerated women. The laundry thing happened up until the 1990s, just an FYI. But we're going to link to a couple master's theses in the show notes that we have found through common Common Cause, I think it's called, whatever the really amazing licenses that we get to read academic papers through. I can't remember, but some really great work done on specifically the one that I recommend the highest is, let me get it right now, Mental Illness and Psychiatry in the Victorian Era, an analysis of prevailing power dynamics. So we'll link to all of those, a couple others besides that in the show notes so that you can explore for yourself. But some too long didn't read. Women were not legally humans. They were legally property.
Yeah. And I
like, legitimately, that isn't trying to be glib. Yeah. They were legally property.
And I think what's so interesting in this episode is we get this juxtaposition of two women in positions, very different positions of power after the death of the man in their family.
Yeah.
And Eliza has a slightly more wiggle room and level of freedom after her father's death. And like we get in other episodes that like financially he wasn't doing great, and that's one of her motivators for forcing this guy to commission her services because she needs to pay rent and pay the household staff. And she's left with whatever her father left the estate in. So, you know, they owe money. The lease wasn't re-signed on the building, and she has no power to negotiate this, to change this. And every avenue she goes down, she's told she's not allowed to do this because she's a woman.
And even goes to her ally, her friend Duke, and Duke's response is, just get married, Eliza, and be done with this.
Yeah. But she still has a little bit more freedom than our Clara, which is interesting. Because she doesn't have, like, there is no other man that can legally control Eliza technically right now. And so she at least can't be institutionalized. And I love the way we get her character, you know, not really doing all the work to realize what was happening to Clara and inadvertently putting her in this position, and then doing her detective work to get Clara back out by proving that her husband was still married to his first wife, which was a bit of devilry, and shows her whip smarts in that. But I thought it was really interesting to kind of explore, you know, what happens to an unmarried woman or a married woman when the head of their household, who was always a man, dies. And it was very, illuminating. And I think setting us up for the next episodes, where we will continue to see how Eliza struggles to navigate a world in which she has to provide for herself and others, but she doesn't really have any power to do that without getting married.
What a conundrum that's faced.
Doesn't it sound like fun to live in 1882 London?
I mean, the clothes are beautiful.
She has pockets in her
dresses. I mean, the dream. Other than that, her life is not one I would choose. So, but we're going to spend 5 more episodes with her. And so we hope you guys join us for all 5 of those. We will see you for episode 2.
Bye, everybody.